magician is just an actor. Just an actor playing the part of a magician. You know, one sunny morning in Kenosha, a chubby little one, you know.
Wells's family background was complex. His parents broke up when he was about 7, and his mother and he moved to Chicago. She was something of a social reformer and a bit of a cultural figure, too.
She used to take a long piece of cord, and she was such a dignified lady that if she would come to the street corner and say to a man, "Will you hold this, please?" and then go around to the other side of the street corner and find somebody else, "Would you hold this, please?" and then leave the 2 men holding the cord. So that was her idea of a fun thing to do. Very tall and handsome, and she was a great beauty.
My father lived in Peking for quite a long time, and I spent 5 or 6 years there, or the greater part of those years.
His father was a businessman who then went on to become an alcoholic, a gambler, and a womanizer.
He was just a playboy. He inherited some money, and he spent it.
And in the meantime, his mother had taken up with this Hungarian doctor, Maurice Bernstein, a sort of very slippery character.
Controlling, wheedling, more emotionally blackmailing kind of a person.
Mr. Bernstein.
Yes, Mr. King.
Mr. Carter, this is Mr. Bernstein.
Mr.
Bernstein is my general manager, Mr. Carter.
When his mother died, he was forced to make him his legal guardian.
He was, from the earliest age, fawned on, identified as being remarkable and charming. His mother's position was that a child had to justify themselves in the room. You had to say something interesting, you had to do something extraordinary, otherwise you were exiled to the nursery. And Wells was not about to spend any time in the nursery.
I played the violin, and I played the piano, and there's nothing more hateful on earth than I was one of those. And my mother, who was a professional musician, died when I was 9, and I stopped playing immediately.
As a kid, I was moved around everywhere. I have lots of homes, but I would like to have the one, but I don't. So I suppose it's Woodstock, Illinois, if it's anywhere. I went to school there for 4 years, and if I try to think of the home, it's that.
I think the most exciting thing that ever happened in Skipper's life was the arrival of Orson Welles at his school, because he had never seen such a prodigy.
The kids, of course, hated him.
I must have been intolerable as a child.
He didn't want to do anything. He couldn't play athletics. He just was not athletic. He was overweight, even as a kid. Skipper said, okay, what we'll do is have him do what he wants, which is the theater.
I played Mary, the Mother of Jesus, at the age of 13. Yes, very good in drag.
He could talk about China. I think he'd been to China. He could talk about Shakespeare, which is my father's favorite author. And he could talk about the Bible. At 11, he could do all this. It's like Mozart playing music at 4 years old. You can't believe it happens, but it does happen. But he was, without a doubt, the only person I know who had absolutely no empathetic skills. I told him just what I thought about him. He looked at me. Joanne, everybody has their little idiosyncrasy. This was a very unusual boy.
This is truly where Orson started his theatrical career. He was putting on Twelfth Night. He was putting on a variety of Shakespeare plays when he was a child. And he was Orson. There was a warmth that I think much of the world never experienced.
So it is a pleasure that we here in the city of Woodstock dedicate this stage to an individual who got it all started. Even though he was a humble person. He made his American debut as a professional theater director upon this stage, now named in his honor, the Orson Welles stage.
I feel his hand on my shoulder.
He did a sort of deal with Dr. Bernstein that he would go to university, but that they would let him go to Ireland on a painting holiday. That was what he pretended he wanted.
I'd come to Ireland and found myself in Dublin without what are technically referred to as financial resources. Well, I had a few shillings, but I blew those on a good dinner and a ticket to the theater. The theater was the gate. I was 16 years old. My career, as you might say, was at the crossroads.
I saw this brilliant, not necessarily an actor, but a brilliant creature of 16 telling us he was 19 and telling us he'd had lots of experience, which was obvious to us he'd had none at all.
And just as for the fun of it, I'd like to stay with them and play a few leading roles.
They were nice enough to pretend they were fooled, and they were desperate enough for actors.
They gave me a star part. I began as a star. And I've been working my way down slowly ever since.
Parts got smaller and smaller and smaller, and eventually Wells, after about 9 months, left and via London, perhaps, we're not sure about that, went back to America. Went off again on another trip, and then he came back to Chicago and felt very much at a loose end.
He came to the theater festival. That's the last time I knew him in the theater festival. One of the students, he had a camera. And it just fascinated Orson. I'm sure this guy was not very knowledgeable. And Orson would tell him what he wanted. First, he'd say, we don't want it right here. We want you to sew it up. So they'd go this silly way up and down the stairs.
It's not a film at all. It was a little joke one Sunday afternoon. We'd all seen either Buñuel or Cocteau or somebody's surrealist movie. We said, let's make one. And from 2 o'clock in the afternoon till 5, we shot some dumb stuff.
My father was married 3 times. I was his oldest daughter. He had a daughter by each of his 3 wives. My half-sister Rebecca, she was Rita Hayworth's daughter. And then Beatrice was the youngest daughter by Paolo Mori, who was an Italian countess. He was not really a family man, you know? That's not where his head was. His head was entirely in his work, and I think having wives and daughters was actually an encumbrance for him.
Wells had picked up a huge amount of knowledge about stagecraft, added to what he already knew. He plugged into the absolute latest developments in the theatre, and that meant, above all, expressionism, a very now and aggressive form of theatre.
He brought, in one word, theatricality. He united the performance, the script, the music, the lights, the sound. As audience, you had an experience you had with no other director. I was 6 months older than Orson, and I met him in his office with John Houseman, who was Orson's partner at that time. John Houseman had great elegance, spoke beautifully. He had the one gray flannel suit at the time because nobody had any money. The Federal Theater was a theater created by the government, putting people to work throughout the country. Orson and Houseman used it to their advantage to create a theater.
The Negro Theater Unit of the Federal Theater Project produced a highly successful version of Shakespeare's immortal tragedy Macbeth.
Tyrant, show thy face. What is thy name? My name's Macbeth.
There were so many curtain calls that finally they left this curtain open. The audience came up on the stage. And that was magical.
There was thunderous reaction to it in the audience. Thunderous. Except for one critic, very fine critic, Percy Hammond. There were two voodoo companies, and they were going boom, 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 boom. Percy Hammond, boom, boom. Percy Hammond died 3 days later.
No, sorry. That was rude. I beg your pardon.
We all left the Federal Theater at a given point. Houseman and Wells left because they weren't allowed to do Credible Rock. They formed the Mercury Theater.
In a single year, the first in the life of the Mercury Theater, Orson Welles has come to be the most famous name of our time in American drama. Time magazine declares,
brightest moon that has risen over Broadway in years.
He was ruthless, tough, disciplined.
We just worked all the time. We worked until 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning.
I don't think there are rules for any of that. If that's what he needed, if that's when his inspiration came and he thought he would get the best out of his performers. You know, the crazy thing is it might be fine for him, but if they're dragged out of bed and are exhausted, they're slaves then, you know what I mean?
Robert Benchley writes in The New Yorker,
the production of the Mercury is, I should say, just about perfect. Wells should feel at home in the sky, the only limit which his ambitions recognize.
The play made absolutely no sense without the film.
The film could not be shown in the theater because there was no real projection booth.
He is an arrogant...
I am Orson Welles! And every single one of you stands here as an adjunct to my vision. You want a career in the Mercury Theater and in everything else I plan to do? Then remember one simple rule. I own the store.
The Columbia Network is proud to give Orson Welles the opportunity to bring to the air those same qualities of vitality and imagination that have made him the most talked-of theatrical director in America today.
Good evening, this is Orson Welles, inviting you to listen now to one of the strangest stories ever told.
I'd been contributing from my radio salary. I kept putting $1,000 or so every week, and we got all our plays on before anybody else because I was doing radio all day long.
You out there, look down, behold!
Sound is the first stirring of the infant. Sounds have a romance. Radio was a medium which employed that magic.
I don't like that literature of yours going out all over the country with my town's postmark on it. I don't like it to be a return address for all that anti-Semitic garbage.
He'd never rehearse. He'd walk in and they'd say, Chinaman, 85 years old.
I'm sorry, sir, but my identity must be...
I used to go by ambulance from one radio station to another because I discovered there was no law in New York that you had to be sick to travel in an ambulance.
Shadow, why are you here?
I anticipated your performance, Mr. Kent.
How did the Shadow originate? Was it a show
know.
Before you took over the part?
No, I was the original Lamont Kratz, as far as I know, but I wouldn't want
you didn't write that?
Oh, no, my God, I didn't even know how they came out.
Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt our program of dance music to bring you a special bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News. At 20 minutes before 8 Central Time, Professor Farrell of the Mount Jennings Laboratory, Chicago, Illinois, reports observing several explosions of incandescent gas occurring at regular intervals on the planet Mars.
A lot of people just accidentally tuned into the War of the Worlds while the Jack Benny commercial was on or something, and it freaked them out. It was the turning point in Wells's career.
Something smacked the ground, knocked me clear out of my chair.
Well, were you frightened, Mr. Welles?
I reckon I was kind of riled.
Were you aware the terror was going on throughout the nation?
Oh, no, of course not. You know, we did Dracula, and it seemed to me during Dracula I had high hopes that people would react as they do in a movie of that kind, and I don't know that they did.
What scared them is very interesting. It was all done as news reports until that moment when the guy is describing this horrible monster. It's coming out. Oh, my God. Ah!
Wait a minute. Something's happening. Humped shape is rising out of the pit.
And it went dead. The people in the booth were going, he just held it.
Ladies and gentlemen, due to circumstances beyond our control, we are unable to continue the broadcast from Grover's Mill.
Citizens of the nation, I shall not try to conceal the gravity of the situation that confronts the country, nor the concern of your government in protecting the lives and property of its people.
We will have to sit down and think very carefully about future broadcasts.
Can you make any specific changes in any programs that were already scheduled, such as next week's, for instance?
No.
Police were already in the control room during the broadcast, not knowing who to arrest.
Flash, country overrun by men from Mars. Millions of Martians are landing in our fields. Strange creatures are dropping from the stratosphere. Men from Mars!
Army bombing plane V-843 off Bayonne, New Jersey.
Do you think that somebody here would have been able to gauge the reaction, which in fact has occurred throughout the United States? Well, every radio program tries to be more dramatic than life.
Oh, my gosh!
Despite his bravado all evening, Mr. Manuel is panicked and bolted out of the car. He was so frightened by the reports of interplanetary invasion that he ran off, leaving Aunt Bee to contend with the slimy green monsters he expected to drop from the sky at any moment. When Mr. Manuelis called her for a date the next week, she told my mother to tell him she couldn't see him anymore. She had married a Martian.
I'm speaking from the roof of Broadcasting Building, New York City. The bells you hear are ringing to warn the people to evacuate the city as Martians approach.
This is Orson Welles, ladies and gentlemen. Out of character, to assure you that the War of the Worlds has no further significance than as the holiday offering it was intended to be.
Noise in crowds like New Year's Eve in city.
In fact, we weren't as innocent as we meant to be when we did the Martian broadcast. We were fed up with the way in which everything that came over this new magic box, the radio, was being swallowed. People, you know, do suspect what they read in the newspapers and what people tell them, but when the radio came, and I suppose now television, anything that came through that new machine was believed.
I didn't go to jail. I went to Hollywood.
He had established a celebrity that made Hollywood have an appetite for it. He was an extremely successful and ambitious designer of conceptual theater in New York. He had been on the cover of Time magazine. He was an important radio performer, which had made him a worldwide celebrity, and the studios saw that they could make a buck from this.
RKO wanted him, and he kept turning it down. And so every time he turned it down, the contract would get better, because he'd ask for something that this just wouldn't give him, and then they would give it to him.
When you honestly didn't want to go, then the deals got better and better. In my case, I didn't want money. I wanted authority.
There was this guy with a beard who was going to do it all by himself. You know, I represented the terrible future of what was going to happen to that town.
His initial project was an adaptation of Heart of Darkness, which he had done on the radio.
We were a bunch of 22, 23-year-old kids, really. And we had moved in and taken over this studio, and all these people were looking around wondering who the hell we were and what did we think we were going to be doing.
We were not in a very strong financial situation at the time, and we thought this
acquisition of Mr. Welles would have done it, but it didn't.
He wanted to shoot the whole movie, more or less, from the perspective of Marlowe, the central character. So we didn't get a close-up of Welles until pretty late in the movie. There were no big movie stars until then, and people wanted to see Welles. And it was a film about blackness. RKO tried to convince him just to hire ordinary extras in blackface in the background, but he wouldn't go with that.
Not knowing anything about it, there was no basis for fear. In other words, if you're walking along the edge of a cliff and you don't know it's the edge of a cliff, you have perfect confidence.
The first day that I directed a film was the first day I had ever been on a movie set.
Be careful, Charles.
Kate.
Pull your muffler around your neck, Charles.
Kate, I think we shall have to tell him now.
Yes. I'll sign those papers now, Mr. Thatcher.
You people seem to forget that I'm the boy's father.
It's going to be done exactly the way I've told you.
It's about courage and audacity, and I'm making this my way. We're going to see from 1 inch to infinity in every shot. We're going to see ceilings, and we're going to tell a very convoluted mystery story about a man's life. It is just one of the great movies ever made.
I didn't know what you couldn't do. I didn't deliberately set out to invent anything. It just seemed to me, why not?
He grasped the medium with such brilliance and enthusiasm. He completely mastered it. It's the first film of somebody who had never even acted in a movie.
I made no campaign promises because until a few weeks ago, I had no hope of being elected.
It was intended consciously as a sort of social document, as an attack on the acquisitive society. But I didn't think that up and then try to find a story to match the idea.
The picture was about William Randolph Hearst and 2 or 3 other newspaper barons. But the picture was also about Orson.
You're a 24-year-old novice director. This is difficult material, maybe impossible. And old man Hearst is going to come down on us with all he's got.
Think of the free publicity.
I'll provide the people of this city with a daily paper that will tell all the news honestly. I will also provide...
That's the second sentence you've started with I.
People are going to know who's responsible.
Basic script was Herman Mankiewicz script. A great deal of that picture is, in every respect, is Orson's picture.
One day in the office, they said, there's a man called Toland waiting to see you. He was, of course, the leading cameraman. He said, I want to make your picture. And I said, well, that's wonderful. Why? I don't know anything about movies. And he says, that's why I want to do it. Well, it was pretty much like my beginnings in the theater. I had the confidence of ignorance.
It contains the very best of cinematography, editing, lighting, performance, screenwriting. It's a quarry for filmmakers.
It was obvious when you saw it was a great picture. But that doesn't always mean that it's going to do big money at the box office.
A lot of the theater chains were afraid to book it because they're afraid their ads wouldn't run in the Hearst papers.
I sometimes forget that you're all Jews. Apparently, quite a number of people forget, if they ever knew. See what you can do about this Citizen Kane picture. Will you, Louis?
Orson said he wanted to open in tents all across the country. Say, this is the picture they won't let you see. But RKO wouldn't hear about it.
In the next 70-something years, it became one of the most admired films ever made.
You can see a change in films after Kane. I said, don't you think you had a tremendous influence? He said, not really. He said, they really weren't influenced by anything important. There were just a lot of ceilings and shadows.
Many people are going to agree it's just one of the great American experiences in the cinema.
I'm ashamed of Rosebud. I think it's the rather tawdry device. It doesn't stand up very well.
Well, I've regretted early successes in many fields, but I don't regret that in Cain because it was the only chance I ever had of that kind. I'm glad I had it at any time in my life.
I was spoiled in a very strange way. I didn't know what was ahead of me.
The magnificence of the Ambersons began in 1873. Their splendor lasted throughout all the years that saw their Midland town spread and darken into a city. In that town, in those days, all the women who wore silk or velvet knew all the other women who wore silk or velvet, and everybody knew everybody else's family horse and carriage.
One of the reasons he liked Amberson so much was because he wasn't in it.
Too slow for us nowadays.
Often he was a name that he used for himself in a movie because he was a name actor. As he said to me once, he said, I don't enjoy acting as much as I should.
The real point of Ambersons, everything that is any good in it, is that part of it which was really just a preparation for the decay of the Ambersons.
Pride of the town.
Hot and cold running water, upstairs and down.
I want to look at that automobile carriage of yours, Jean.
I'm coming. Fanny, you'll catch cold.
I'm going to ride that thing tomorrow. I want to see if it's safe.
Good night, Estelle.
Good night, Eugene.
You'll be ready 10 minutes after 2.
No, I won't.
Yes, you will. 10 minutes after 2.
Yes, I will.
Come on, Jack. Get a horse. Get a horse. Get a horse. Look out, Lucy.
What happened to them? George.
Get excited.
A good film, I think, should not be an illustrated, all-talking, all-moving version of a printed work, but should be itself. A thing of itself.
George, you tried to swing underneath me and break the fall foam when you bent over. I knew you were doing that. It was nice of you.
Wasn't much of a fall to speak of. How about that kiss?
Hear them sigh, wish to die,
And see him wink the other eye at the man who broke the bank at Monte Carlo.
About the time Major Amberson dies, the picture starts to become another picture, becomes their picture. An actual plot was changed.
Well, I'm sorry about that because I was involved in all the cuts, but it was one of those circumstances that couldn't be helped. He was in South America making a film for the government to help our war effort and that good neighbor policy we had. The studio was naturally very upset. They had a lot of money in this film and they wanted to get it out. Consequently, we did cut about 25 or 30 minutes of the original film, and we had to make 2 or 3 or 4 new bridge scenes tied together, and there was a new ending shot.
How is Georgie?
It's going to be all right. Fanny, I wish you could have seen George's face.
There's no scene in a hospital, nothing like that ever happened.
I can only say that all of us up here did the very best job we could with the problem.
As one important critic said, RKO had hired Wells to make them masterpieces, and he delivered a masterpiece, and they didn't like it.
The key long scene at the end, which was Aggie Moorehead in a third-rate lodging house, that was the best scene in the picture. That was what the picture was about. It's gone. I was sent to South America by Nelson Rockefeller and Jock Whitney. I was told that it was my patriotic duty to go and spend $1 million shooting the carnival in Rio. They put it to me that it would be a real contribution to inter-American affairs and so on.
anything that I've done in any medium, if it's ever been any good, has been my way, to quote the song.
I was in terrible trouble then. In the meantime, RKO is now a new government, and they ask to see the rushes of what I'm doing in South America. And they see a lot of people, black people, and they made a great publicity point of the fact that I had gone to South America and thrown all this money away.
RKO said, well, maybe we better stop this.
So I was fired from RKO. And its slogan for that year, printed on every piece of paper that went out from RKO, was showmanship instead of genius. I really wouldn't want to try to edge my way into an elevator that for geniuses only.
Sometimes you get frustrated that people want to do things to your projects, in theater or film, because I've had both. And then you have to fight. And I'm sure Orson Welles had a lot of struggles, as we know, and lost battles, and hopefully won a few.
He was a brilliant man. He had a lot to offer. He made 2 wonderful pictures, but he also went bad after the second picture.
Horrendous. I mean, there are some who've committed suicide.
An Italian waiter came and said to me in Italian, "Did you ever make a picture after Citizen Kane?" I didn't get a job as director for years afterwards. So then I did Jane Eyre.
Can I do anything?
Stand out of the way.
I'm sorry I frightened your horse.
Apologies won't mend my ankle. Down, Violet!
I was obsessed in my hot youth with the idea that I would not be a star. I was in a position to promote myself as a star. And I should have. I should have gone back to New York and played Hamlet, and as long as it was going, I didn't. I had this idea that I wanted to be known as a director, and that was it. Next picture I did do was The Stranger. And I did that to show people that I didn't glow in the dark, that I could say action and cut just like all the other fellows.
What is it, dear?
When you grew up in that era, you saw movies for the junk that they were. Nobody took them seriously.
You become part of the crime.
But I'm already a part of it. Because I'm a part of you.
And I know that people dislike it, but I just love his love of using the medium for all of its tricks and playing with them. This is what a studio movie could be.
It was supposed to be a hammy performance. It wasn't unconsciously, so that's all I can say on my behalf.
They cut that one up, too. Welles was an ideological challenge to Hollywood. He was simply not a Hollywood filmmaker.
None of his pictures really received wide distribution except for The Stranger, which was the only picture of his that made any money.
It's not an accident that it comes in a can. They welcomed the adventure in the 19th century much more than they do today. My kind of fellow's the real outsider.
Good evening, everybody. This is Orson Welles, the Mercury Wonder Show, broadcasting tonight from the Air Service Command Training Center at Fresno, California. Last week, an American president fell in the midst of battle.
Guess who's taking Jack's place on the program tonight? Who? Orson Welles. That's who. Orson Welles.
I did Around the World in 80 Days, and was, I think, the best thing I ever did in the theater. But it was a financial disaster. Before the opening in Boston, the costumes were sitting in the railway station, and there was $55,000 to pay for them. And I was trying to think who in Hollywood could send me $55,000 in the next 3 hours. I thought Harry Cohen, only one with the courage to do it. I called him up. I said, I've got the greatest story you've ever read. And I turned the paperback around that the girl in the box office was reading. It was called The Man I Killed. I said, it's called The Man I Killed, written by such and such, a paperback. Buy it. I said, you get me $55,000 to Boston.
And I will make it for you if you'll send me $47,000 in 2 hours.
55,000 came.
Welles always liked to pretend that he had absolutely no idea that Harry Cohn had asked him to make a movie with Rita Hayworth. He had no idea what to do. The stage door keeper of the theater that he was working in when he was doing Around the World happened to be reading a book called The Lady from Shanghai.
It's called something or other. It wasn't Lady from Shanghai then.
Sometimes he told the story one way, and sometimes he told it another way.
It's all nonsense.
Maybe that comes from one of those foreign language interviews where I pretend I understand the question and say, yes, you know?
Signor Welles, sappiamo che lei non ama molto le interviste, soprattutto durante i festival.
No, non è per questo.
Sì.
Io sono un idiota per le risposte, questo è il problema.
We are bringing together for the first time on the air one of Hollywood's best-known married couples, Rita Hayworth and Orson Welles.
I had divorced from Rita. She came to me and said, I want to make your picture.
Welles would say anything at any time if it sounded good at the moment. And he often admitted to that himself.
Harry sent for me and said, I want you to do that with Rita, for her sake.
I was lucky enough to be with her longer than any of the other men in her life. She is a dear person, and she was a wonderful wife and an extraordinary girl in every way.
There have been many women, haven't there, Frank?
Yes.
I think the first sex biologically is the female sex, and there are many creatures in our world who are women and only become male as long as is necessary and then revert to their original and superior condition. You know, I think we're a kind of decoration. I think the basic and essential human is the woman. And all that we're doing is trying to brighten up the place because we've got to try and justify our existence. Look how little we do to keep the race going.
I had a marvelous sex life.
Is it too personal to ask what age it started at?
Well, if I tell you, you won't believe it, so I better not answer.
He was notoriously flirtatious with both sexes. He used to love to lie in a bath and do interviews with his associates, which embarrassed some of them and perhaps delighted others, I don't know. I myself have absolutely no evidence that Welles ever had any kind of sexual relationship with a man, but he was very, very conscious that it was something that he could use.
It's the business of the director, is to carry on a continual courtship with the people he sticks in front of the lens. And when you deal with stars, you know, real stars, you have to really make love.
Personally, I don't like a girlfriend to have a husband. If she'll fool a husband, I figure she'll fool me.
George.
Even though this is a more conventional thriller with a movie star at the heart of it, the film is much more surrealistic, much more strange, and all the more strange because when the studio doctored it, they put into it these big close-ups of Rita Hayworth, and they add to the surreal quality of the film.
I thought it was me that was crazy. After what I'd been through, anything crazy at all seemed natural. But now, I was sane on one subject, her. I knew about her. And I was the fall guy.
He was not afraid of being self-conscious with the camera.
he did it with such conviction and with such brilliance that you begin to realize, I see the camera moves.
Bewildering, astonishing things are happening all the time, building up to the great mirror maze at the end.
I knew I'd find you two together, though you'd be foolish to fire that gun. With these mirrors, it's difficult to tell. You are aiming at me, aren't you? I'm aiming at you, lover. Of course, killing you is killing myself.
Michael. Come back here. Michael. Please.
And this is one of the great mysteries. Why this extraordinarily smart guy was outwitted by so much less remarkable and intelligent people so often.
Molly.
Beware, Macduff. Macduff. Beware, Macduff.
I don't know what I haven't done about this play, except do it as well as I'd like to, but it's a great feeling to be dealing with material which is better than yourself.
Archery!
Double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble.
He had nothing. The sets are bad, but the way that he then had to light them and choreograph the camera and the actors in those sets, it had tremendous power.
Which of you have done this?
Sometimes when you can do it all, you know, it's like too much ice cream, too many flavors, you can't even make a decision. But how you feel the limitation shows the real artist or not.
None of his Shakespeare films were ever really supported by the critics. They complained about the Scottish accents.
Knock, knock, never quiet. The plague of these pickles.
He had to do all these changes in the soundtrack and cut Macbeth, but he was the one who did the cutting.
It was a big critical failure. It's the biggest critical failure I ever had.
What is that noise?
I'm very happy in America, but it happens that America is not as happy with me as I am with it.
He was different. He was really doing something so unique to his own imagination. And whether that means his films were successful is a whole different matter. They are successful.
Like the fruit pickers, I go where the work is.
I don't think of myself as an exile at all.
In fact, I've spent most of my life not quite unpacked.
One of the things that had driven him away was the McCarthyite period. He was very messed up by what was going on in America politically. He had been a real progressive, you know, and he was horrified.
He was never a communist, but the FBI was following him since Citizen Kane when Hearst was a friend of Hoover.
I've been investigated over and over again. It's one of our favorite indoor and outdoor sports.
Was wollt ihr denn überhaupt ein? Sind Sie deppert?
Ja, zie mij niet, chance niet zo blöd. Eine Frechheit ist das mitten in der Nacht so einen Krawall zu machen.
Harry.
The most successful thing he was ever part of, commercially, was offered a percentage as part of the deal, but he couldn't afford it because he needed the money, so he would have been a wealthy man.
Look down there. Would you really feel any pity if one of those dots stopped moving forever? If I offered you 20,000 pounds for every dot that stopped, would you really, old man, tell me to keep my money? Or would you calculate how many dots you could afford to spend? Free of income tax, old man.
What's also kind of interesting and ironic is that Harry Lime, for him, was the most detestable character he ever played, but everybody else loves Harry Lime.
I have never in my life seen anything in the same category of hideousness, but I adore him.
Don't be so gloomy. After all, it's not that awful. Well, what the fella said. In Italy, for 30 years under the Borgias, they had warfare, terror, murder, and bloodshed, but they produced Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, and the Renaissance. In Switzerland, they had brotherly love. They had 500 years of democracy and peace, and what did that produce? The cuckoo clock. So long, Holly.
A great many of us have been in Europe during these last years. It's been a kind of frontier for us in films. It's a more anarchistic and freer atmosphere.
A lot of people, I think, conceptually like the idea of change, but they don't want things to change. But Wells' impatience was about that change, and his interest in the Scottsboro Boys case and early civil rights. Speaking out, which you can only do if you were an independent.
My own loyalty is greater to the idea of myself as a member of the human family than it is as a member of any profession. I don't take art as seriously as politics.
One of the great things about Wells as a filmmaker is him capturing the periods of whatever he was making the film, the paranoia of what was going on in America. It's really reflected in Othello.
Black Othello, the outsider, the mercenary, the foreigner, must feel a certain insecurity when he contemplates this curious conquest of his, the senator's daughter who fled from her palace in the dead of night to marry a black man.
It's partly a kind of an atmosphere and a mood, but it's like a horror film.
C'était le contraire de l'ennui. C'était très, très excitant parce qu'on savait qu'on faisait quelque chose de tout à fait exceptionnel et hors du commun.
He said anything?
I know not what he...
What?
Lie.
Lie with her?
With her. On her. What you will.
Came to Mogador on the west coast of Africa to shoot. Got a telegram. Scalera, with whom I had a contract to make the picture, had gone bankrupt. We had no costumes, nothing.
That was the big scene of the murder of Rodrigo. And what can you shoot without costumes? And that's a Turkish bath. Nothing was designed. Everything had to be found.
We had to do it with whatever money I could raise and stop until I raised some more. Now, that took almost 4 years. Now, there are still people today who say, I don't want to hire Wells as a director. It took him 4 years to make Othello.
Othello was his own production. However, there are various versions of it. There's his version, and then there's a version that Beatrice redid.
Called some friends who are in the business, the movie business, and sort of said, where do you think one could find a negative or whatever's left of Othello? And they ended up finding it in some lab in New Jersey. It really was in perfect condition.
They made, I think, a few mistakes.
In June of 1955, he finally got round to nailing Moby Dick. Of course, he'd appeared in John Huston's movie of it. He staged what he called Moby Dick Rehearsed here. It only ran for 3.5 weeks, but I think it's one of the landmarks in British theatre of the 1950s, and it's certainly a great landmark in Wells's own life. They'd filmed a little bit of it. The possibility is that it was impounded by the tax people here, that it was lost, that somebody stole it. A very Wellesian episode altogether.
Hands off, you tour of mankind! Old Ahab stands alone among the millions of the peopled earth. Nor gods nor men, his neighbors, cut no good.
Television was the medium for great freedom and experiment. We started working. Both of us believed that you don't hang on to any idea, but the moment you've had an idea and you begin to try it, that leads to think of something else. And then, as I was doing that, turn around, yes, Peter, but what if instead of that, we started with him here and he leapt over to that point? Orson suddenly took off with tremendous passion.
Cataracts and hurricanes.
One thing one can be sure is that there wasn't before him an Orson, and there'll never be a second.
I think I made essentially a mistake in staying in movies because it's the mistake I can't regret because it's like saying I shouldn't have stayed married to that woman, but I did because I love her.
In theater, you're in space, and the lighting can focus where you want the audience to look, but in general, the audience can look anywhere they want. The actual complete manipulation of the image is something you can do in film.
I can't change this condition of love, but I think I would be better off without it.
On December 25th, an aeroplane was sighted off the coast of Barcelona. It was flying empty. This motion picture is a fictionalized reconstruction of the events leading up to the appearance of the empty plane.
Rocco was talking to you. What was it?
It was just a name. He was dying.
What name was it?
Arcadis.
It's a story about a high financier, a man of many countries and 3 passports. In the morning, I think it's splendid. In the evening, I wonder.
How much obligation do you feel to a mass audience?
I would love to have a mass audience.
I knew what I wanted. That's the difference between us.
Did my poverty help my creativity? No.
You not to make the slightest sound, as the princess is in a state of trance.
Orson really, it seems to me, just wants to work. But at the same time, there is something in him that drives him to alienate the people with the money.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes?
Well, I'm a young filmmaker and a real big fan. I just wanted to meet you.
My pleasure. I'm Orson Welles.
I'm Edward D. Wood, Jr. What you working on?
Well, the financing just fell through for the 3rd time on Don Quixote. I hate when that happens.
He had just done a picture for Universal as an actor. They asked him to play the heavy in this thing. He needed the money, so he said, okay.
I said, who's going to direct it? They said, well, we haven't picked a director yet. We have Orson Welles to do the heavy, though. This was on the long-distance phone, and after a static-filled pause, I said, why don't you have him direct it? He's a pretty good director, you know. And the reaction at first was a prolonged silence, as though I had suggested that my mother direct the film.
Ed.
Yes?
Visions are worth fighting for. Why spend your life making someone else's dreams?
I said, I'll direct it, but if I also get to write it, every word of it, an entirely new script. They said yes.
You won't have any trouble with me. You bet your sweet life I won't.
Touch of Evil is, of course, really the story of the decline and fall of Captain Quinlan. Orson's part.
He's everything we hate. But he isn't what we hate. It's his method. And it's that ambiguity which gives tension to a story. They loved the rushes. Then they saw a rough cut of it. They were so horrified that they wouldn't let me in the studio. I gave a dinner party not long after I started the picture for all my old producer friends and big star friends, the old Hollywood brigade. I was a little late, so they were all there having their drinks on. I came in order to arrive in time in my makeup and costume. And they all said, "How are you, Orson? You're looking great." It was too dark for them, too strange.
Welles had been fired off the film, kicked off the lot. He wrote this 58-page memo about what should happen to the movie, and pretty much Universal at the time took the memo and tossed it. It's not like with Magnificent Ambersons, as if we found a missing last reel, but the film became more itself. Orson, above everything else, was a master filmmaker and knew exactly how to make a film, as it turned out, from beyond the grave. In Welles's memo, he said two things about the opening shot. He didn't want titles over it, and he wanted a montage of different music tracks. At that time, this was seen as a B movie. It was very rare that somebody would not have titles at the beginning of a film in a B movie. So there they are walking through the town, and oop, there's that music, and there's a car. And right now, boom, that car could have blown up. But if there are titles over that, you just know it's not going to blow up. So by removing the titles and having this sort of free-form music, it puts a suspense under this scene that didn't really exist before. He'd spent those years in radio doing exactly this kind of stuff. We did this in American Graffiti, which was the same kind of thing.
What we called worldization of the sound, which is to make it sound like it was in the environment in American Graffiti and having to pass by in cars and that sort of thing, Welles had already thought of in Touch of Evil. I think both Walter and I were very charmed by that whole concept, and he's definitely way ahead of all the rest of us.
Well, Hank was a great detective, all right.
And a lousy cop.
Is that all you have to say for him?
He was some kind of a man. What does it matter what you say about people?
Goodbye, Dad.
Adios.
Adios. Wow, huh? Yeah, you know, Welles didn't even want to do this movie. But, you know, sometimes you do your best work when you got a gun to your head.
I do think working for posterity is vulgar.
Je pense vraiment que travailler pour la postérité, c'est vulgaire.
Because posterity is just as big a whore as the present.
Filmmakers of today can do what they do because Orson did it. Every art form that I know has somebody who blazed new trails, and their influence starts being felt about a generation later.
Plato told us that we should know ourselves, and the object of every artist, good, bad, or indifferent, is a lifelong inquiry into that subject. And his work is testimony to that effort. But I'm in no position to sum myself up.
It's a peculiar thing. When you have an artist who works so outside the box, not everybody gets it at the time.
Do you know that I always liked Hollywood very much? It just wasn't reciprocated.
he freed the directors from the kind of static ways they used to have about the way you light, about the way you put your camera, the way you have the setting and so forth. And it's very clear in Trial, the Kafka. He didn't do really Kafka, he did Orson Welles' Kafka.
I was living in a hotel on Touil-Tartour, pacing up and down in my bedroom, looking out the window. And I'm not such a fool as not to take the moon very seriously. And I saw the moon very large, what we in America call a harvest moon, enormous. And then miraculously, 2 of them. And on each moon there were numbers, and I realized they were the clock faces of the Gare d'Orsay. And I remember that the Gare d'Orsay was empty. And at 5:30 in the morning, I went downstairs, got in a cab, crossed the Seine, and entered this empty railway station, where I discovered the world of Kafka.
It has been said that the logic of this story is the logic of a dream.
Come with me, Mr. Kay.
Orson's view of Joseph K. was that far from being the innocent victim of bureaucracy that Kafka had written, but in Orson's version, and I can hear him saying, I can hear his thundering voice, he's guilty as hell.
He would like this story to make a metaphor about his vision of the world. Speak about how we can feel guilty without being guilty.
You came to see me about this case. That's good.
I saw it as a European story, full of old European bric-a-brac, with IBM machines lurking in the background.
I think it's a major movie, whatever the critics said about it.
There really wasn't indie filmmaking in the 40s, 50s, you know, when Welles was doing it. He wasn't happy doing it. He had no choice.
There is a new moment in filmmaking. It's not that we're better, the filmmakers, but that the distribution system has broken down a little and the public is more open, more ready for difficult subjects. Imagine what it means for me to have had the chance to make it. Indeed, to have had the chance to work.
He was an unbeatable man. You couldn't, you know, if something didn't work, he said, okay, let's move forward. And he would do another thing and another thing. There was no way of stopping him. I said once to him, my God, you looked wonderful in Jane Eyre. That's the first time I saw him. And he said, yeah, but you should see the corset I had. We are on the Dalmatian coast, on the Adriatic. Down there is a small place called Primošten, where we shot Dead Reckoning, later entitled The Deep, with Lawrence Harvey, Jean Moreau, Orson Welles, myself. Jean Moreau, I was a pretty girl when I was young. No woman ever looked at me like this. He said, Jean, I don't want to be rude, but you're not the age of playing a young bride. Look, I don't care what these people are going to think of me. I'm not in the movie business. I'm 72 years old. I want to have a farm. I dream of chickens, literally, and have a donkey and the dogs and so on. So I'm going to tell anything that comes into my mind. I was in the elevator, and Polanski stepped in. And he said to me, you know, I was thinking of using Orson, but I hear that he's late on the set, that he's difficult. I'm not very sure. I said, if you're not sure, don't engage him. He would have been the happiest man in the world if Geraldine, whatever her name is, came and said, Orson, this is your son, you know? I hear that the guy is very good looking on top of everything. It would be wonderful. They were were showing magnificent Ambersons in the middle of the night. I see the light, I go to the living room, and just before I open the door, I see his reflection in a mirror, and I see him crying. And I don't open the door. What's the use to cry? I do cry enough for Orson. I cry too often. But I also smile because I'm so happy that I have known him.
I think man is a crazy animal. I think we're also marvelous people, divine in our potentialities. You see, there you are. You can say anything with passion and get a hand.
If you're going to try to finance movies and live, you have to earn your money somehow.
Any man with a decent regard for human life, and the slightest bit of heart, doesn't understand it.
I would have sold my soul to play the Godfather, but I never get those parts offered to me.
20 million years ago, an ape-like creature inhabited the earth.
I'm a king actor, maybe a bad one. They weren't necessarily the best actor. They were the actor who played the king.
Mike Nichols knows how to deal with actors. Orson would turn to Mike, as I guess he did to every director, and say things like, "You're really going to do that shot when you know you're not going to need it?"
Knucklehead fool. You empty-headed joker.
You say, my God, I'm in a scene with Orson Welles. There's an actual piece of film in my life that has Orson Welles in it.
I don't want the men to pay any attention to me. Just carry on as usual.
Don't pay any attention to that. Just carry on.
Will you clam up? Money, money, money. I never concerned myself with these matters.
There's this complete sort of self-knowledge and almost the arrogance of an athlete, like the ownership of his body on camera. Before he got to be, you know, the size of a Buick.
My salads are a bit complicated.
But he would just slice through.
Dinner! Ho, dinner!
Would you take this away, please, and bring me the steak au poivre? Thanks a lot.
When I watched Orson Welles eat, it was like somebody making love to the food. He really loved to eat, and you could see his eyes lit up. When he put a forkful in it, his whole face was like it's sunshine.
I particularly remember the lunch. There was a marvelous mousse. Any donuts or sweet rolls?
And he could describe every dish the way it tasted.
Schwarzwälder Torte, Gugelhupf, Burgtheaterlinse, Topfenschnitt, Kaffee-Creme-Torte.
Obviously, when you looked at him and said, you know, this is not a guy who is on a diet.
Reisel, Würfelgugeln und Sackertorte. How sweet it was.
Even when he lost some idea of himself physically.
Overweight me?
The words still had the same kind of precision that his body once had.
Oh. Are you going to help me? Have I your support or have I not?
No, Your Grace. I'm not going to help you.
Then good night, Master Moore.
You have to wait quite a long time before Welles makes his masterpiece, which, in my view, and the view of many other people, is Falstaff, The Chimes of Midnight, which is, to me, one of the great, great achievements of filmmaking in the 20th century.
Falstaff! Good night!
Now comes in the sweetest morsel of the night, and we must dance.
I saw it 3 times in a row in one night because I thought I might never see it again. So you had intellectuals from the University of Chicago and you had winos off the street, and they all loved the film.
This chair should be this state, this cushion, my crown.
Welles had by now mastered the art of making independent films, of making them in the way that he wanted to make them, in this kind of improvised way. Although he had a script, of course, for it, but he didn't stick very closely to the script, except that, of course, it was Shakespeare's words.
What is honor? Here, a trim reckoning. Who hath it? He that died a Wednesday. Doth he feel it? No. 'Tis insensible, and yea, to the dead. But will it not live with the living? No. Why? Detraction will not suffer it, therefore I'll none of it.
Violence always has been part of our story. It is, you know, I've seen it in my own lifetime long before this period, and we certainly read about it in history. That's the way we won the country and stole it away from the Indians and all the rest of it.
If I wanted to get into heaven on the basis of one movie, that's the one I would offer up, because it is, to me, the least flawed. Let me put it that way.
I banish thee on pain of death, as I have done the rest of my misleaders, not to come near our person by 10 miles.
Chimes at Midnight is true through and through and through, and is profound and is moving and contains an absolute essence of Shakespeare and an absolute essence of Orson Welles.
Falstaff?
Falstaff is dead.
It's human to the core.
Jesus, the days that we have seen.
The Munich Film Museum is part of the Municipal Museum. Oya is very much caring to keep the legacy of Orson Welles. All the material Orson had was shipped to Munich.
Sometimes I try to imagine Orson having different bedrooms in different motels and hotels, and the doors to this bedroom is locked, and under the bed are hidden, you know, boxes and boxes of film. Who knows?
Some believe these films look more amateurish because they are not really Hollywood productions, and the others see him as a hero of the independent filmmaker. The problem is only that few of these films were really finished, that he still was working and working and working on them.
Pellegrina's dead. Even the servants think so. I had no chance to say goodbye. Will you do that for me?
Everybody who is an intellectual artist starts on many things and sometimes doesn't complete them.
Since it's my own little picture that I put my own money on, I don't know why they don't bug authors and say, when are you going to finish Nellie, that novel you started 10 years ago?
If the wolf is not really at the door, it's a big temptation to say, well, this isn't my best, I'm going to put it away.
A newly wedded couple are here on their small yacht, cruising up the west coast of Africa on their way to the Mediterranean. Out in these waters, they might expect to be very much alone. But there's someone else out there.
He said once, I'm not going to call Don Quixote Don Quixote, I'm going to call it when you are going to finish Don Quixote.
Stanley Kubrick had projects that he never completed. The difference is Welles actually got footage in the can, as opposed to a number of projects by people in a much better financial position or industry position, never even getting them off the ground.
Are you happy when it's all done and cut and goes out to be printed and into the movie houses?
No. No, because you always hope you can make it better.
I don't think it's at all any failure to want to finish or be a fear of finishing or what. That sounds like some kind of bizarre sexual malady.
I don't know why he didn't finish it, and I never asked him. But we have an unbelievable body of work, including the greatest film on Shakespeare, Falstaff Chimes at Midnight, the short color film Immortal Story, one of the most brilliantly shot films ever. Film after film was phenomenal.
Studios had lost interest in him, and he could put together his projects in a more European way financially, getting bits of money from here and there. So it was comfortable for him to be in Europe during that time.
The way I figure is that you've only got so much luck, and it doesn't matter when it happens. And I was incredibly lucky.
So the central figure in this story is a fellow with, you know, that can hardly see through the bush of the hair on his chest.
Oh, I'm going to go on being faithful to my girl. I love her.
Par rapport à vous, par rapport à votre film Citizen Kane que vous avez fait assez jeune, qu'est-ce qu'il faut faire alors?
In school, you should be making movies.
À l'école, vous devriez faire des films.
Not letting the professor tell you about Eisenstein and D.W. Griffith.
Et ne pas avoir un prof qui vous parle d'Einstein.
Up to that time, it was the seamless film, in a way. The hidden camera, the camera that you couldn't tell was there. So Welles was the one to really open up the Pandora's box. In a funny way, I guess, picking up where silent films left off.
Every single, not just every scene, but every shot has an idea. There's a concept and an idea being executed at every second.
Welles stands kind of above everybody's work. I think every filmmaker has some relation with Welles, if nothing else. You know, he created the air we breathe in that regard, you know. He's sort of the patron saint of indie filmmakers. Well, so much what he did came with quotation marks around it. Postmodern. I think about just the beginning of F for Fake. It's just all about saying, this is what you're seeing, and this is what I'm doing, and this is what you're seeing, but this is what I'm doing. That sort of mirror on a mirror effect.
It was a pretty queer experience to start making yet another movie with a storyline rotten with coincidence. For instance, that the author of Fake, a book about a faker, was himself a faker and the author of a fake to end all fakes. During the next hour, everything you'll hear from us is really true and based on solid facts.
Not only are we aware of the edits as they go by, but he's showing the editing process at the same time. It's like watching a talented juggler do his job.
This is a film about trickery, fraud, about lies. Tell it by the fireside or in the marketplace or in a movie.
Editing is cinema in a certain sense. Because everything is broken into bits, you can have a great deal of invention.
I did promise that for 1 hour, I'd tell you only the truth. That hour, ladies and gentlemen, is over. For the past 17 minutes, I've been lying my head off.
That kind of self-awareness is great for art. He's part of that movement that includes Picasso and Duke Ellington, all those artists who were aware in a way that artists had not been before.
Our works are spared, some of them for a few decades or a millennium or two. The treasures and the fakes. Our songs will all be silenced. But what of it? Go on singing.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you all very much.
I don't believe this. This is...
Who is that?
That's our director, Mr. Wells.
That is a director?
Yeah.
What? I'm on my mark. Yes, always. Move your camera.
He came back in the late 60s. Films were beginning to be made in a different kind of a way.
The money guys didn't trust him, and they had good reason not to trust him. It doesn't matter how great the material is, ultimately it has to pay off for somebody.
We will sell no wine before it's time.
We know a little place in the American far west where Charlie Briggs chops up the finest prairie-fed beef and tastes. This is a lot of shit, you know that. Come on, fellas, you're losing your head.
They all wanted to meet him. They all wanted to have lunch with him. They all celebrated him. And then somehow, this man is not going to be predictable.
Here's a scene from one film that Orson is just finishing called The Other Side of the Wind. I must say it's a fascinating scene. It's about a celebration in honor of a famous movie director who is not Orson.
I get a phone call. Orson wants you to do his picture. I said, Orson Welles? I don't know Orson Welles. He doesn't know me. I mean, I know Citizen Kane is probably the best picture ever made. But why? Are you fucking around with me? I knocked at the door, and I figure some lackey is going to open the door. The door opens, and it's... Paul Mazursky, come on in. I'm making a film called The Other Side of the Wind.
We're going to shoot it without a script. We're going to make the picture as though it were a documentary. The actors are going to be improvising.
He started in 1970, and he worked on through his passing in '85. I never saw Orson sleep.
It was a stop-and-start situation. It seemed to me that every time Orson got a little bit of money, he would bring the cast back and start shooting again.
I'm still confused about the area of the magician as director. This is crap. This is intellectual bullshit.
When I tell you that my partner is the brother-in-law of the late Shah of Iran, you will understand why we're having a little legal difficulty.
He owes me $25.
I sort of felt that we would just keep making the movie until he died.
Let us raise our cups, then, standing as some of us do on opposite ends of the river, and drink together to what really matters to us all, to our crazy and beloved profession, to the movies, to good movies, to every possible kind.
There is this terrible consolation of being 40 years ahead of your time. I wish I'd be on time sometimes. The night he won the Oscar, the special Oscar, and he had asked John Huston to pick it up for him.
Genius is a word that must be used very sparingly, especially in this world of films.
He said, well, I'm not going to go. I said, why not? He said, they're not going to get that out of me.
On my way back to Ireland, I'll stop in Spain and give him this.
We were sitting at the Beverly Hills Hotel watching the Oscars. And Orson says, yeah, come on right over, John.
You celebrated a big birthday, didn't you?
I didn't celebrate it, I just had it. I used to pretend it was my birthday when I took a girl out to dinner. And then I'd have the waiter bring a cake in and sing happy birthday, and I'd use that as an excuse to extend the evening. I have a sentimental inclination toward hope. I believe in bravery. Worship it.
To me, Orson is so much like a destitute king. On this earth, there's no kingdom that is good enough for Orson Welles.
But you feel wonderful, don't you?
Oh, sure.
As it must to all men, death came to Orson Welles. That, a paraphrase borrowed from his own film, Citizen Kane.
Orson Welles told me about a lunch he had recently with director-producer Steven Spielberg, who had just purchased the famous Rosebud sled from Citizen Kane for $45,000.
But I said we burnt the sleds. That's why we enjoy life, is that we know it's got to end.
Orson Welles was 70.
After my father died, I got a call from my half-sister Beatrice. She and her mother Paula were arranging a funeral in Los Angeles, and I was really devastated by the place where it was held, which was like a horrible motel room. Nothing had been done, I felt, to truly honor my father.
He didn't want to be cremated. He said, I took so much from this earth, I should give it back, at least something. And they didn't do it.
I would like to do something which would leave at least the art form concerned or the profession better for my having done it. To use this medium for something except entertaining.
I'd like to have been more useful in the world, and I hope I can be. It's, you finally get to a point where art for art's sake doesn't seem a good enough flag to be marching under sometimes.
What's a better flag?
Well, you've got to believe in something bigger than yourself.
We run out of film.
You had me.
I must.
I'd be riveted. I love it. Don't cut a word out.